one of the activities we are involved in KPMG Malta as part of the tax practice is in the aviation space. The aviation industry in Malta can be broadly divided into three main parts. The first is the aircraft maintenance section, which is where there are two main operators in Malta, being Lufthansatechnik and Lufthansatechnik, where they do aircraft maintenance in Malta. Those companies employ a substantial number of people, about 600 to 700 each, in the aircraft maintenance sector. Next is the aircraft leasing companies and their aircraft operators, airline operators in Malta, one being, of course, national carrier in Malta, but there are a number of other small operators in Malta which also do leasing and do aircraft operations from Malta. And then there's the third broad sector would be the setting up of finance companies in Malta, aircraft leasing companies in Malta for international operations, and we normally say that is a part of the financial services sector of Malta. The main attraction for these companies to come to Malta is the tax side. For the aircraft maintenance companies, their incentives are mainly the incentives under the Business Promotion Act, that is basically fiscal aid consisting of tax credits based on training and investment they make in accordance with the EU state aid rules. And the second one is Malta's general tax system, which is based on the imputation system, whereby even though the headline rate is 35%, when dividends are paid, when distributions are made, the shareholder can get a tax refund, which basically reduces the tax to between 0 and 6.25%. In addition to that, for aircraft leasing companies, we have attractive tax depreciation rates of 4 and 6 years, which basically mean that the tax base, the whole taxable income, is eroded in the first few years of an operating lease, which means that a typical operating lease of about 8 to 10 years, there would be no taxable income, even when the asset is disposed of. Besides the fiscal incentives, that is backed by a good work ethic in Malta, trained staff, even for the aircraft maintenance and engineers, the use of English as the business language in Malta, and the fact that a number of laws in Malta, especially and also the Companies Act, is the English text prevails over the Maltese text. On the regulatory side, Malta has established an aircraft registry where the aircraft frames and engines can be registered. It's quite an innovative legislation. The regulator is very proactive and it's with a can-do attitude. On the registry, you can register the aircraft, the engine. The registration can be done by the owner or by the operator, just like an LSC. The buyer, under the conditional sale agreement, can also register it, and even you can register an aircraft which is still under construction. Malta has also applied the Cape Town Convention, which gives creditors, with regard to their mortgages registered on the register, peace of mind. And the registry is still in its infancy. It is mainly attracting at the moment lighter, small aircraft and business jets. But just as Malta had such a big success with the shipping registry, which was set up in the early 1980s, and just today the largest ship registry in Europe and the 7th largest in the world, we're very hopeful that the aircraft registry itself will have a similar success story. Finally, back to tax, one other incentive which was recently introduced is legislation whereby the VAT, which would be suffered on aircraft which is registered in Malta, would be only between 5 to 6%.
There's been an awful lot of change in the industry over the last number of years. Most recently, I think, we've seen Japan re-enter the market and has been involved in two of the major acquisitions of leasing companies in the last 2 years. The Chinese, of course, are pretty active in the leasing market. Most recently, you would have seen a Chinese consortium are acquiring ILFC, the second largest lessor in the world. We have seen the financing market as well change. There's been historically, in the last 5 years, I would say, an awful lot of ECA, Export Credit Agency backed debt to finance the aircraft. That was really there to help the funding of aircraft in a time where there was a real credit crunch and financing was difficult to come by. We have seen, I think, the European banks re-enter the market again. Obviously, the Japanese banks are lending, the Chinese banks are also lending, and the US banks are lending into the sector. So there's much more banking activity in the sector. The capital markets are currently very hot. There's been a lot of financing raised in the US capital markets on the debt side. And we've seen a number of unsecured bonds, we've seen EETCs, and I think what has been interesting is that a number of the EETC issuances that have been raised have been outside the US. So most recently Air Canada raised one, Emirates had one last year, and there are a number of other airlines that have said that they're going to look at raising a EETC in the near future outside of the US. So I think that's going to be an interesting development. I can see the debt market moving from its pure US centre to a more global investor base. There's also been a number of airlines that have put in significant orders for aircraft. It's going to be an interesting dynamic to see, I guess, where those aircraft going to be fully utilised by the airlines themselves, or are they going to look to sell on some of those aircraft? There's been large orders placed with a number of the lessors as well. The manufacturers themselves are increasing their production rates. You've had some new engine technologies that are being introduced in the next couple of years. All of that has potential effects on residual value of aircraft. And so there is a big question over the useful economic life of aircraft. And, all of that is obviously going to be an important metric in assessing the sector going forward. Obviously, if the useful life comes in, the economics of leasing. But we are in a period of very cheap debt at the moment, so there's a lot to be positive about. Ireland has been deeply involved in the sector for over 30 years. One of the very first aircraft lessors was KPMG Aviation, which was set up in the mid-70s. The only other one at the time was ILFC on the west coast. We have grown up with, and KPMG has grown up with GPA, and out of GPA spawned a number of very large aircraft lessors. People who worked there set up their own aircraft leasing companies. We've worked hard in advising the sector and maintaining, I suppose, a very dominant presence in the sector, particularly in Ireland. So, any of the major transactions that have taken place over the last number of years, we've been involved in pretty much all of them. I would say we advise 90 to 95% of the market. In Malta, we have worked with quite a bit over the last while. We have a very good relationship there with Andre Zarb. We are seeing Maltese financing companies involved in a number of the transactions with the lessors more recently.
We are an aircraft leasing company. We're active leasing aircraft, commercial aircraft, to a lot of airlines around the world, active on every continent of our planet. Our operations out of Malta will be owning and leasing aircraft out of different structures, using Malta as a home base for taking advantage of the various double taxation treaties that are located in Malta. We evaluated plenty of jurisdictions before making the decision to come here. Malta is obviously an EU member state. It uses the euro as its currency, which is very good for our business to be part of an EU member state. We looked for different structure which would be complementary to our structure that we have for Jetscape as a company. And we obviously looked at different tax jurisdictions and how that affected our business. We looked at the legislation of the jurisdiction that we wanted to set up. Malta has a great legislation as it relates to both tax and law. And we looked at double taxation treaty networks. For our industry, we're active on all different continents, as I said, and the double taxation treaty networks is extremely important for us, and we found that to be really good within Malta. Also, the cooperation between, or the ties between Malta and Ireland, which is one of the aviation hubs of the world, is really strong. And as such, we know that we can be active within Malta, but also use Ireland as a second option for our various structures that we need to set up. We have been here for almost a year now, setting up the company, establishing local assistance through various companies that are already active here, setting up bank accounts, everything else. You can really feel that the Maltese and the Maltese company are very proud of its island, and also they want to do everything that they can in order to facilitate companies like ours to set up businesses here. It is you get good advice, and you always get the relationships, really strong relationships. Really, it's been fast to grow them and to nurture what Malta can provide. And on a personal level, moving here has been very interesting, learning the Maltese culture, but really adopting it and liking it. Both myself and my colleague are really well established here now.
Lufthansatechnik started its operation here in Malta back in January 2003, so it's our 10th year of operation, and we started expanding slowly from a one-bay facility, taking one plane at a time, now to a facility where we run 5 planes at a time, and it's quite a huge facility in the meantime. It's one of the largest facilities we have in Europe for aircraft overhaul. Turnover in man hours last year was 740,000, which is quite big, and we have about 600 employees here on the island. When we thought about setting up a facility in the southern part of Europe, we thought about being close to the market. So from Malta, we tackled the southern European market and the northern African market. One of the important things you need is the right people. And people we find here, there's a huge, the English is the common language, so there's the natural language of the aviation business people have. We have with MCAST and the university in Malta, we have the possibility to gain well-trained people. And if you look around the island, you see all these shiny, well-kept old cars. You feel that the people have a feeling to maintain technical things. Then the law, which is applied in Malta, it's the question for us is if it's more a law related to the German law. So yes, it's close. So that's why it's then very calculable what's happening. The support from the government to build up a facility like this, the investment here is around 60 million euros in total. So the support we gained on that one helped to decide for Malta. And so far we haven't been disappointed at all. It showed that all our business plans, there is a reliable operation. It's foreseeable future in Malta. One of the reasons why we thought we would be coming here turned out to be true, and it proved that we have done our way, we expanded, and in this January we had 10 aircraft at the same time being maintained in our facility.
Over the last couple of years, we've seen a real concerted effort by both the government and working hand in hand with industry to establish a center of excellence, a cluster of excellence in the aviation space. And it's borne some fruit, we have to say. We've seen high-profile companies such as Lufthansatechnik and SR Techniques set up in Malta. And obviously the establishment of such high-profile companies and the incentives being offered by government and the focus being put there on by both the government and industry has brought a number of related companies and or service companies surrounding the aviation sector to Malta. We've got a number of private charter companies. We've got a number of service companies, airplane painting companies, and so on and so forth, setting up in Malta. And with this, Malta has also managed to attract aircraft financing, increasingly aircraft leasing companies, owners and lessors, and other related industries. KPMG Malta itself is perhaps uniquely placed in that, as a member of the KPMG International Network, we work closely with KPMG Ireland, perhaps the leading office or professional service providers in the aircraft finance and management space, which really enables KPMG Malta or KPMG globally to provide a seamless transition between multiple jurisdictions. And that, I think, has been one of our greatest strengths.